Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for what is number 5, episode 5 of our Ubiquiti, Mastering Ubiquiti webinar series, Discovering UniFi OS Best Practices. So we're going to help you get the most out of UniFi OS, and welcome back to everybody that's joined us previously. We've had really good attendance so far. The brief agenda is going to be the similar flow as we've already had, which is quick introduction to the speakers, a little bit about foregone. We're going to move on to setting up UniFi OS, looking at step-by-step guide to some deployments, bit of optimization, some really good tips, and then recapping and closing remarks, and as always a Q&A for you guys to ask us anything that you may need. So slight change of format today, as you can tell by the slightly unpolished intro. I've taken over from Rachel, who's done a really good job. She's on holiday. I've been with the business 9 years next year, which coincides with our 10th year of our distribution agreement with Ubiquiti. I also run a couple of the other divisions that we have within the group, which is Capital's Products and VoIPON. Yeah, really strong relationships with Ubiquiti. They've been our biggest partner within the group for a number of years. We were over in America with them a couple of weeks ago at their main hub over in Salt Lake City, and we had some really good calls with our sales team, our tech team, with their CEO Rob Perra, and some of the main guys in Ubiquiti about what the future is, what the roadmap looks like. So I've jumped in today to take over from Rachel. As always, Russell King is going to be heading up the webinar, doing all the tech specs. Russ has been with us for a number of years. I think it's his 10th year next year, in IT for 15 years. He probably won't admit it, but he is the most successful trainer in Ubiquiti's, well, globally for Ubiquiti, has the highest pass rate of any trainer globally, and certified over 1,000 engineers for foregone. And we've also got Jake, who's our commercial support manager. Again, been working with Ubiquiti for 10 years, lots of accreditations with other brands, as does Russell. And yeah, runs our commercial support team, makes sure that all of our support offerings are running as they should, and that all of our service level agreements are being adhered to. So I'm sure you guys, we know that there's a lot of returning people. So you're probably fully aware of who foregone is. We often think that when we do co-branded activities with Ubiquiti, that everybody's going to be a foregone customer. And I remember the first training course that we did about 5 or 6 years ago, and very few people there were actually foregone customers, but they were all Ubiquiti customers. And that's fine. Other distributors are available. But fundamentally, we've been at the cutting edge of networking and Wi-Fi with Ubiquiti hand in hand since 2010. We do distribute globally, and obviously we've got a number of products within our portfolio. We're always looking at bringing in new products with new manufacturers. We have quite a robust process for onboarding manufacturers. So, whilst we are vendor agnostic, we have taken manufacturers off our site. We probably, in recent years, have taken more off our site than we have added on, because we only really want to work with the best in class for our customer base. As referenced by the introduction for Russell and Jake, we have got some real expert technical support who have been in this industry, really since the start. And again, our reseller program, the support that we can offer, our close ties that we have with manufacturers, really do all build into the support that we can offer. We certainly don't like the term box shifters, because we offer a lot more than that, and hopefully that's a reason that you guys will see the value that we add with these webinars. So just before we start, as always, coming back into the basis of what we said earlier about customers, coming from different backgrounds, us not necessarily knowing where they're coming from, where customers are finding us. We just want to have a quick poll. You can see it on your screens there. the Ubiquiti UniFi OS console covers many key areas and are used across multiple of industries. So just helping us get an idea of what major industries you guys are from, that will help Russell hopefully react very quickly and maybe tailor some of the USPs, maybe tailor some of the optimization towards what you guys are going to need and how you're going to get the best out of this webinar. So I'll probably give you about another 5-10 seconds to get your answers in, and then I'll pass over to Russell. And yeah, thanks very much for attending, everybody, this morning. It's greatly appreciated, and I hope you get a lot of value out of it.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of our Mastering Ubiquiti webinar series. Thanks, Matt, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to have everyone with us. By the looks of things, most of you are going to be support engineers, which is great for me because this is going to be relatively technical, but it's going to cover all the basics for doing installation, which is what tech support usually does. And there's a lot of maintenance and admin stuff in here as well. Today, we'll be discussing UniFi OS and demonstrating a basic deployment using some of the latest devices. UniFi OS is a platform that allows users to deploy several Ubiquiti technologies like network CCTV surveillance through UniFi Protect, door entry and people tracking through UniFi Access, and voice over IP through UniFi Talk. In order to deploy these, a wired or wireless network infrastructure is required, and Ubiquiti has this covered too through UniFi Network, which is the focus of this webinar, really, how to set up UniFi network hardware such that network administrators and installers are ready to deploy clients and other UniFi OS applications in their installation environment. So let's first talk about the UniFi network application and what it does. The UniFi network application is server software to which UniFi network hardware can communicate and vice versa for distribution of configuration, updates, client analysis and management, as well as many other features, such as providing a guest portal for guest users. The UniFi application as server software runs in the background as a background task on the operating system it has been installed on. The UniFi network application manages UniFi network distribution hardware such as routers, switches, and access points, building-to-building bridges, as well as clients connected through said hardware. The UniFi OS platform or UniFi network application, if it's installed locally, can be accessed via a web browser via a local administrator account. It also secures links securely to Ubiquiti's own cloud services, such that Ubiquiti account holders can access it via unifi.ui.com when logged into their linked account. The server software itself can be installed on common operating systems such as Mac OS, Linux, and Windows, and the latter two can be deployed on local hardware or on virtual machines, like, for example, AWS and Azure in the cloud. Alternatively, installers can purchase an UniFi OS appliance. These are specially designed devices that integrate the UniFi OS for applications such as UniFi Network, and it's designed to be on-premise, really, for its on-premise deployment. UniFi OS applications can come with some UniFi Network hardware features integrated to them, for example, a switch, a gateway, or an access point. The UniFi network application can manage many devices, but there are certain server hardware performance limitations based on what devices the application is running and dependent on the number of devices it manages. So, as a rough guide, we recommend the following appliances based on the number of clients being served. For up to 1,000 clients on a single geographic site, the UniFi Dream Machine or UniFi Dream Router. For up to 2,000 clients, you can use the UniFi Cloud Key Generation 2 devices. The standard and plus variants also support multi-site deployment, allowing for more than a single geographic site to be managed. For up to 3,000 clients, the UniFi Dream Machine Pro or Special Edition and UniFi Dream Wall are great options for a single site environment. And for 10,000 clients, the Cloud Key Enterprise provides multi-site capabilities in a 1U rack server configuration. You can have a theoretical limitless number of clients on your own server hardware on a suitably sized virtual machine in the cloud, as an example. Access to the server's web user interface requires a login account, which allows local access. However, you can access UniFi OS through this use of a single sign-on account, which you can register for free at account.ui.com. As this allows for access to administer and monitor the configuration of sensitive hardware, Ubiquiti provides multi-factor authentication options to ensure the account remains secure. Another security consideration relates to the fact that UniFi OS requires network connectivity to communicate with the devices they manage. As such, it is recommended to ensure your firewalls and antivirus products on the server installation of the UniFi network application provide access to the server so as not to block any required network communications. With UniFi OS consoles and the applications, administrators are not limited to a single account for access to and management of or monitoring of this installation. In fact, multiple administrators can access a single UniFi network application server if linked to their individual UI accounts via an invite by the super admin, which is the person completing the initial setup wizard. Permissions can be set per site or per controller for specific invited accounts, such as read-only accounts for monitoring network performance. So let's talk a little bit about how UniFi devices can be managed through UniFi network application. UniFi devices communicate with the UniFi network application via the network that they are connected to. They are typically managed by and taken ownership of by the application securely through a process called adoption. If they are new, i.e. in factory default state, there are two methods they can use to alert the network application intended to manage them. The first is automated discovery. This is where the device broadcasts its presence on a layer 2 local network. Assuming the application server is on the same network, it will detect this broadcast and then present the device to the end user, who can then adopt and take ownership of that device. The second method is a manual process, which can be used in cases the network application is on a separate subnet to the device being adopted. There are three primary ways to ensure the application can see the devices from the remote network. The first is SSH, or Secure Shell Access, where the installer can remotely access the command line interface of the UniFi device and set a property called the inform URL. This points to the IP address of the application server. This is then used by the device to communicate with the network application on a remote network. DNS, where if the installer sets the domain name UniFi on a local DNS server to the point to the IP address of the UniFi application, the UniFi device will automatically send its adoption request to that IP address. Finally, there's DHCP option 43, which is an IP address sent out by the DHCP server to a UniFi device that can be used to reach the network application. Let's now talk about some of the basic planning considerations. Ubiquiti recommends a 4-step process to create a successful UniFi network: plan, design, deploy, and configure. Planning should involve discussions with the end user or the customer to ensure data requirements are considered. Topics such as bandwidth requirements, number of clients, the type of devices the customer is using, and the minimum expected performance requirements of those devices should be taken into account, as well as their locations. Other devices, such as IP cameras connected to the network, need to be considered to ensure sufficient data throughput is provided where they are connected. From there, you can design the UniFi network and select the correct UniFi devices for the intended purpose. Generally, UniFi devices can be selected based on their performance and feature set, and so selection of these devices can be based on throughput and client density in the installation environment. Placement of these devices should also be considered to ensure adequate coverage, and in the case of Wi-Fi access points, you want to avoid sources of noise and interference. You can use the antenna radiation patterns guide on the Ubiquiti website to assist with deployment positioning. After this, place switches where appropriate, with appropriate features such as PoE and uplink capability to ensure the end users and downstream network infrastructure perform correctly. Okay, so let's talk briefly about UniFi access points and wireless basics. This should clarify basic requirements for positioning of access points. Firstly, let's talk about access point transmit power. Generally speaking, the coverage of an access point signal is defined by EIRP, or equivalent isotropic radiated power, which is the radio's output power plus any increase in the transmit intensity caused by its antenna and defines the maximum energy radiated in any given direction from the AP. The problem is that this value tends to be much greater than the client devices, for example, mobile phones, as they need to conserve battery power. As a result, the range of a client is usually limited, and therefore the transmit power of the access point needs to be reduced to balance both receive and transmit signals. Overextending coverage due to high transmit power can cause other access points nearby to experience interference where they are operating on the same or neighboring frequencies. This is called co-channel interference or adjacent channel interference, or CCI and ACI, and these should really be avoided. In the 2.4 gigahertz band, the channels that avoid overlap of signals are 1, 6, and 11. The channel width can be increased in both bands, which results in substantially increased throughput availability, but this has several inherent disadvantages, such as increased noise, fewer reach channels, and significantly reduced coverage. The 2.4 gigahertz band is also shared with many other interference types, for example, Bluetooth and microwave ovens, so 5G and 6G are preferable for better results. In order to ensure clients do not stray too far from an access point, there are a couple of features installers can use to limit distant low-speed clients. Minimum rates effectively forces clients to connect only when they can communicate at sufficient speeds. Clients can also roam at the point that their throughput rates fall below these minimum rates, promoting high speeds and low latency throughout the coverage area. Minimum RSSI is a technique that access points use to attempt to kick the client when their signal strength falls below a given value. It can cause dropouts of live streams and VoIP calls. Finally, I want to talk about antenna gain. This is a physical property of the antenna on an access point. The more gain an antenna has, the more directional it is. The main benefit is that specific areas can be targeted with high gain antennas, and the increase in gain results in higher receive sensitivity as well. The good news is that coverage increases are exponential. Where standard 3 dBi antenna in a standard access point can give around about 30 to 35 meters coverage, for example, a 15 dBi antenna on a directional antenna or access point can provide maybe hundreds or even up to maybe even a kilometer of connectivity in good cases. Beware, however, that SIL is improved through local reflections. So for local access points, this is a massive benefit, but long-range clients who are connected to high-gain antennas can't make use of local reflections. This means that clients can accidentally block the signal easily, for example, turning away from the AP. Line of sight is therefore crucial in these long-range cases. All right, let's move on to the gateways and switches and cover network enhancement. Creating a second logical network in UniFi has several effects, one of which is creating a virtual network called a VLAN. Routing and VLAN trunking is enabled on the gateway and connected switches by default. This effectively means that any given UniFi switch port will receive broadcast traffic from a VLAN, even when that port does not require access to the VLAN where that broadcast traffic is present. This is where switch port overrides come in, where you can not only remove VLAN trunks from specific ports, but also enable features that limit the effects of broadcast traffic, such as port isolation, which can be used on switch ports where UniFi access point is directly connected. This reduces broadcast traffic throughput on the AP and increases performance by reducing the amount of time the AP radios are transmitting. Where throughput availability is limited, for example, a slow internet connection or high client density deployments, you can also limit throughput through a feature called Wi-Fi speed limits. These can limit individual clients or all clients on a given wireless network. This makes more airtime available at each access point and therefore provides more consistent throughput for all users. This also reduces the possibility of saturating the internet connection, which can improve latency and performance throughout the deployment. All right, let's finally cover traffic management. Where a UniFi Dream Machine, Dream Router, or Gateway is installed, administrators can set up traffic control features, for example, parental controls, domain filtering, network isolation to ensure questionable or inappropriate traffic is blocked to key clients or entire networks. These can target websites and apps and even limit throughput speeds to these specific locations. Okay, before I move on, I want to let you know that we'll expand on the concepts I have covered during the live presentation in a few moments. We have only covered the very basic information for installation, and there are many other concepts and stages to deployment to be aware of. We do offer the UEWA training course, which provides certification to installers and integrators, as well as key information for engineers and technicians. The course covers the concepts I have talked about in much greater detail, as well as all the other different UniFi products, stages of a network installation project, and Wi-Fi theory and fundamentals. Everyone will receive a post-webinar information email, including a link to the Ubiquiti accredited training course and product pages, so you can get to see the course information and book if you're interested. For now, let's demonstrate what I've covered during the last 20 minutes or so. I'll build a network from scratch using a few UniFi devices, and I'll demonstrate the setup of concepts and features we have covered. So let's get the screen share set up. Okay, so this is the unifi.ui.com portal. Right now I have set up a webinar console. This is a UniFi Dream Machine Pro. All I've done is completed the wizard, which is relatively straightforward to do, but I'll demonstrate all the technical concepts. I was going to demonstrate inviting, but unfortunately user invites may involve a lengthy email, so we'll skip that and cover all the technical aspects. If I log into this console just by clicking it via unifi.ui.com, I can access this anywhere in the world. I can see the different applications, so network, UniFi Protect for CCTV surveillance access, which is people and door entry access control, UniFi Talk for VoIP installations, Connect and identity as well. Console settings provides information about SSH access, for example. You can transfer ownership to a different superadmin if required. You can do factory reset on the access point as well as some other power functions. The system log will provide information, for example, backups and push notification settings, as well as admin activity updates and some critical events that may happen on your UniFi console. But let's now have a look at the UniFi network application. Brilliant. So this is a dashboard. It provides information about the UniFi OS console and the types of traffic that are going along it. So this is general information, including the internet connection, the uptime, activity, and wireless clients as well. Maps will give you a topology diagram showing the topology of your UniFi network infrastructure, as well as connected devices, client devices. The devices list shows devices that are prepared to be managed, or you can manage the individual settings from here as well. As you can see, we have a USW Pro and we have a U6 Enterprise access point. So we'll just get the adoption going for these two devices. These were discovered on the local network connected to our UniFi Dream Machine Pro. Clients will allow us to see client details. So for example, its current name, the connection, so what port it's connected to. This will be the first device that the UniFi device that the client is connected to that's currently adopted, IP address and some other information, but you can customize these columns as well to show all sorts of information. Security insights will give you information about traffic identification, filtering activity, and a traffic map as well, so you can see where traffic is coming from globally. The system log will show you the same kind of information as the OS console, but this will be more specific to UniFi network. So for example, admin activity, client, access point, and some triggers and push notification settings as well. So both of my devices have now been adopted successfully. You can see some of the settings in here. So we can see an overview, information about the device locally, including things like memory usage, fan level, and temperature. It makes it very easy to monitor the device. You can see its uplink information and how fast that is, and some system performance information as well over time. Ports will show me connected ports, and it's a handy diagram to show you what devices are currently doing. And we have a port manager as well, which I'll demonstrate shortly. And then settings, which are general settings for the switch. So for example, whether I want to give it a static IP address or let it use DHCP. Some global switch settings, and some information about the screen that's on the front of it, as well as obviously being able to forget it, restart it. And we can also use locate to make it flash its screen, so administrators can see where in the topology it's installed. The UniFi 6 enterprise access point shows similar information, but it also gives information about the Wi-Fi experience, air stats for the different bands, and its uplink as well. Okay, so now I'm going to create a VLAN network in the settings and make some changes in there as well. Hopefully this will be a little bit useful to you as well. So I would prefer to have a management network and a user web network. So I'm just going to create a new virtual network on here, and we'll call it webinar client. I'm going to just define it as a manually scaled network. So just going to use a 24-bit subnet ending with 2.1. Really basic setup, but I'll just add it. This will create the trunking profiles on the switch as well. I'm also going to want to limit the speeds that Wi-Fi clients are using. So I'm just going to go into profiles and create a speed limit on here. This will be under Wi-Fi QoS. And I'll define a speed limit of 10 megabits per second for the webinar clients. Okay, I'm going to create a wireless network now, and I'm going to attach it to that virtual network that I've just created. We'll call it webinar Wi-Fi. Try to keep the name as short as possible because this does take airtime to broadcast. And I'll just give it a password as well to something generic. The network I'm going to attach it to is the webinar client's virtual network I just created, and I'm going to have it broadcast on the access point I've already adopted, or I can create groups of access points that this can be specifically set up against. I'm going to set up some advanced features as well. So at the bottom, I'm going to adjust the minimum data rate control. I'm going to set that to 12 megabits per second for the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands. I'm also going to define the Wi-Fi QoS on here to the client speed limit and apply the changes and create the network. Okay, so now I need to set up my access point. As I mentioned before, the transmit power is probably going to be slightly too high for this installation. So what I will do, I'll go back to the settings, and in Wi-Fi, I'm going to set the transmit power to some custom levels. I usually go for a guideline of around about 9 dBm for 2.4 gigahertz, and then 14 dBm for 5 gigahertz. I'm going to leave the 6 gigahertz radio as it is. I'm going to turn off channel optimization as well, and then apply the changes. What nightly channel optimization does is essentially it checks the airtime over the day, and then it will select a channel with the lowest airtime. I'm going to set my channels manually on my access point under the circumstances. So in Wi-Fi Insights, I'm going to go to Environment Scan, and I'm going to sort my list of Wi-Fi networks that my access point has detected locally by signal strength. And I can see that the channels that are being used, I can only see a couple on channel 6, but none at the top. And channel 56, I'm going to try and avoid as well. So in the access point settings, I go to my U6, go to settings, channel 6 for the 2.4 gigahertz, because that's the least contested, and I'll set channel 36 for the 5 gigahertz. I'm going to let 6 gigahertz radio do its thing because there's no other access points using Wi-Fi 6E at the minute, so 6 gigahertz is fine. Here's our minimum RSSI settings. So I'm going to set a minimum RSSI on, if this little tooltip would go away, I'm going to set that to -80 on both. That just limits clients to receive signal strength indication of -80 dBm. And if the signal gets any worse than that, then they'll be kicked from the access point. Okay, so we have a very good setup so far, but I am very much aware of the fact that other ports on my UniFi switch are receiving broadcast traffic from my management untagged network, so I want to untag those. I'm just going to pretend for now that all the other ports are going to be client ports except for the SFP at the end. So I'm going to go into the port manager in a moment and select those. But for now, let's go back to settings, go to profiles, Ethernet ports. I'm going to create a new profile here. And I'm just going to call this wired clients only. Default network will be the webinar clients, so this will untag that virtual network on the ports that I use this port profile on. And I'm going to do a traffic restriction as well, so I'm going to want to block the default network just to make sure that there's no traffic going down that port from the management network that I've set up. So let's apply those changes. We're going to go back to the switch and go to ports. I'm going to go to the port manager. So I have a laptop connected to port 4, and I'm going to want him on the clients only one as well. So basically every port after 3, so ports 3 to 24, I am going to want to have those set up to be the clients only network. Just give me a moment here when I select these. It's being a bit slow, but that's fine. Okay, great. Just wait for this to catch up. And what we're going to do is set the port profile on here. So it's taking a little bit longer than I was expecting, but that's fine. We'll get there. So Ethernet port profile. I'm going to set it to wired clients only. So this is a profile that only allows the client's virtual network to be available on these ports. Let's apply those changes. Okay, great. So let's go back to the unified devices. The naming on here doesn't look particularly great, so we're just going to go to the settings on these devices and change them. Let's call this the core switch. And on our UniFi Enterprise, again, UniFi Enterprise is not particularly description. I'm going to call it Webinar Room. Apply. Okay, so let's go back to the Webinar Room access point, and we're going to have a look at the utilization. So in Insights, we can see the utilization, so receive and transmit frames as well as interference. This is how much airtime the access point is using, or how much of the time that the radio is in operation. We can also do RF environment scan, so we can see how much traffic or noise interference is on the individual channels. I won't do this for now, but it's a really handy tool to use to make sure that you're selecting the right channels. So for the most part, the devices are set up and you have a good network infrastructure. Let's do a bit of traffic management. So in traffic management, we can create some rules. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I don't want a specific application to have access, to be accessed by anyone. So we'll just select it as an app. And what I'll do is I'll look up Facebook. So I'm going to block Facebook. And we're going to target all devices. In fact, we'll select webinar clients. And just make sure it's scheduled for always and add the rule. And why not, for fun, create a different rule as well. Let's do a speed limit on speedtest.net. We'll limit to 1 megabits per second. We'll target all the webinar clients as well. I'm glad I'm not a member of this. And there we are. So now we have a speed limit on speedtest.net, 1 megabits per second, and we're blocking Facebook as well. Okay, so let's have a look at the system. Now I've got a really decent setup. I'm going to go to backups and just take a backup of my UniFi network application and just download the backup configuration file. And then I will go back to the OS console's main screen, and if I find console settings, and I'll take a backup of the whole console as well. So in future, if I have any problems with this UniFi Dream Machine, I can just purchase another one and use that backup to get to exactly where I am now. And let's have a quick look at the map finally. So maps can be used to create a floor plan and place your devices. And it also shows the coverage for my access point as well as my switch and my UniFi Dream Machine. And that's everything. I hope you find this really useful. We will now jump back to the recap. Okay, so just a very quick recap. I have covered UniFi OS console, some of the admin stuff in there, a lot of the configuration settings in, for example, Wi-Fi RF basics, and setting up the UniFi network, as well as done a full demonstration, pretty much start to finish, of creating a UniFi network infrastructure and the features you should really be aware of as a basic setup. As usual, it has been a great honor to talk to you today. I'll now pass you back to Jake, and I look forward to answering some questions very shortly in the Q&A. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Russell. So I hope everyone found that demonstration helpful and informative. That's what we aim for. I'm Jake. I am the commercial support manager here at Foregone. I've been working alongside Ubiquiti for about 10 years. I'll be helping with the Q&A in a second here. Just before we dive into that, I wanted to cover off what we're offering on the back of this webinar. So we, as mentioned before, Russell is a certified Ubiquiti trainer. He's trained over 1,000 engineers at this point. We offer the UEWA frequently during the year, which does cover a lot of what's covered in this webinar here. So if you do want to learn more or get an official certification, that is something we can offer. On the other side of that is we're also offering a dedicated support session just based on this webinar alone. That is the UniFi OS training. So if you are looking to implement a system like this and you just want some help, you don't necessarily want the qualification, we can also offer some one-to-one help on that. That'll be done by Russell as well. So we'll move across into the into the Q&A now. Let's have a look at what we covered. So, I've missed a slide. That's my fault. So we've got the next webinar coming up, episode 6, which I hope you'll join us for. You can see the link to that on the screen now. So that'll be going over the Protect app in depth, which is obviously Ubiquiti CCTV offering. So that's surveillance, throughput requirements, security, camera selection, management and positioning, viewing footage, platform and users, and another live demonstration, just like we had today. So we'll jump over to the Q&A now. Hello again, Russell.
Hello.
We've had a lot of questions today. We're not going to be able to get through all of them on this webinar, but we will follow up every question via an email. So we'll send around an email off the back of this to link to the recording. So it's a question that's frequently asked is we do record every session and we have all the links on our YouTube page. So we'll send around an invite with those links on. So yeah, we'll make sure to cover all questions, but let's jump into the ones we've had. So the first one we've got from S. Barlow, what's the maximum number of devices that the UCK G2 is capable of supporting? Let's say that's probably aimed at client devices, sorry, not client devices, actual APs and switches rather than client devices. We covered that in the webinar. So.
Yeah, so the recommended maximum number, so far as Ubiquiti is concerned, is 1 gateway, up to 10 switches, up to about 40 access points, and up to 2,000 clients. Just because of the way that UniFi controller works, UniFi application works, you can kind of change those values a little bit. So, for example, if you only have maybe 100 clients, you could have many, many more access points and switches. But generally speaking, try to limit to what the Ubiquiti recommends. You can look up UniFi application maximum devices or UniFi cloud key maximum devices. There's a Ubiquiti help guide that gives you the maximum numbers there.
So there's a tool available as well on their site. Oh, fantastic. Let's have a look through the other questions from David. On a multi-site controller, how do we force adoption requests to only appear on one specific site?
You can't do it. The target for the unified devices is the IP address of the controller, so it's going to be controller wide. So if you have multiple sites on the controller, it's going to show up on all the sites. You just got to trust your administrators if they have site specific permissions not to adopt it to the wrong place. But it's not a massive dilemma if you do adopt it to the wrong place, because you can easily just move that device to another site. There's an option to do that on the interface.
Exactly. We've got one from Dan here saying, is it possible to assign VIP status for network traffic to and from a specific device? So we're talking about QoS.
Yeah, so Wi-Fi QoS, again, it targets specific devices and it targets Wi-Fi networks as a whole as well. So what you can do is, in theory, is set a low speed limit for a Wi-Fi wide setup, and then just target a specific device to be unlimited by another Wi-Fi QoS profile or bandwidth speed limit profile, and then they'll get the unlimited speeds, whereas everyone else is limited.
Cool, perfect. Next one's from Mohammed. Is there a way through UniFi to limit collective speeds on a particular SSID ID, i.e. SSID has a maximum of 50 megs across the entire user base connected? So it's one I'm pretty sure.
You can do bandwidth limits to specific ports. It's a switch port feature. You could also limit your access point as well. But you probably wouldn't want to limit too much a specific device. Having said that, on a particular SSID, yeah, I don't think it's possible. You have to set speed limit for the Wi-Fi wide, and then just try to make sure that's limits
exclude one specific device rather than just target. Cool. Yeah. So one from Robert. Please can you give an example of using the identity service? That is what we'll be covering that in the next webinar that will come under the Protect one, as that interlinks quite well with Protect. So don't worry too much about that. That will be covered in the future. Patrick, is there any way to monitor the connectivity of APs and get notified by email if they go offline or have any other problems?
Yeah, so that'll be covered under the UniFi push notification settings, as I mentioned before. You can set up push notifications. I believe they're disabled by default, but you can send it to email or to the UniFi network application. Sorry, the network app on the smart device like Android or iOS, if you have the app installed. And it'll give all sorts of, you'll be able to push notifications to you for specific events. And there's a nice big selection there as well.
Perfect. So we've got what are the core differences between the UniFi 6 Pro access point and the UniFi 6 Lite? That's asked by Aston.
Yep, so with the U6 Lite, it's only 2x2 so far as I'm aware. So it's going to be relatively slower. For the most part with the access points, it's about performance and client density. So the U6 Lite will probably have a slightly slower main board, so it'll be able to handle up to a certain number of clients before it starts really struggling internally. With U6 Pro, it's going to have a lot more capability. So, you know, you want to scale based on the number of clients expecting to connect. On the U6 Lite, probably 30 to 40 clients is going to be fine. Whereas if you have any more than that, maybe up to 100, 150, 200 clients, then U6 Pro is going to be more suitable.
Fantastic. We've had a question from Andrew. Can you use a UDM Pro to manage multiple sites and multiple devices, or is this better to use a cloud-based controller? So if you have a UDM Pro for your own business, is it a good idea to run all of your clients' sites on this? I suppose that would tie in well to the UniFi online service.
Yes, so the UDM Pro is a single site device. You can't have multiple sites on a UDM Pro, but you can have multiple UDM Pros and have them all linked to the same account.ui.com account, so you can access them all via unifi.ui.com. And then a single administrator can see and manage all those UDM Pros. If you want to have multi-site design and have multiple customers connected to that, generally speaking, we don't recommend that. But if you wanted to do it that way, then you probably want to look at maybe doing it as a very, very cheap kind of subscription service, and then put your controller on Azure or you know, Amazon Web Services as a virtual machine. That way, it's scalable. It's always going to be online, and then you can manage multiple sites from there as well. But appliances, generally speaking, we don't recommend it. And even for the UDM Pro would probably be maybe a headquarters and maybe a couple of sites, geographic sites that are related to that business. So you can manage it that way.
Awesome. I think we'll roll on to our last question. I know we've had a lot more questions, many more than we were expecting, but that's great. We're loving the interaction. We will do our best and we'll cover those all in emails later today. But for now, I think this is going to be our last one. So we've had one from Mark that is it not recommended to use auto channel selection for wireless?
So nightly channel optimization. It's great from the perspective that it monitors airtime utilization, but it's over the course of the day, which means you may have peak times that end up using a lot more airtime over specific times, and those may be peak times, in which case you have a worse off experience. So there's a few factors it doesn't take into account. So generally speaking, you want to do a site survey. You want to see what kind of interference, noise, and contesting wireless LANs are in the neighborhood of your access points, and then set the channels manually to make sure that reuse patterns are respected. So you're not using the same channel on two neighboring access points, but also to avoid noise interference sources that maybe channel optimization didn't take into account.
Exactly. Reuse is a huge one. You know, don't want to be fighting your own access points for coverage. So yeah, that's unfortunately that's all we've got time for. Again, thanks everyone for joining us today. Thanks very much, Russell, for your demonstration. We hope to see you all in episode 6. You can see a link to that at the top if you want to reserve a place now.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.